Hello and welcome to today's webinar, a masterclass on IT security. On this event, Roger Grimes, data-driven defense evangelist, will be teaching you ransomware mitigation. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got an amazing presentation lined up for you today. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the event. First off, we want this to be educational. We encourage your questions, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event. You can use the questions panel there in your audience console to ask those questions. And of course, we appreciate those in advance. We're also doing our best question prize to help encourage questions. If you have a question on your mind about ransomware and mitigation, prevention, now's the time to ask, get those questions in early. We also have a number of handouts there in your audience console. There's links to the ransomware simulator, a resource on how to prevent and mitigate ransomware like the pros. And then the full slide deck from today's presentation in PDF is available for download. I know Roger's going to go fast. If you want to download that deck and check it out as a take-home resource, I encourage you to do that. We also have an Amazon $300 gift card that we'll be announcing at the end of the live event. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. Again, we're doing the best question prize for a $50 Amazon gift card as well, and we'll contact that prize winner after the presentation via email. Prize winners must also meet the same prize policy. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Roger Grimes, data-driven defense evangelist at KnowBe4. Roger, always great to have you on. Take it away.
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for showing up today. David's right, I do talk fast, so if you haven't heard that before, many people feel good about downloading my slides later on because of how fast I talk. But here to talk, essentially about ransomware and everything I've learned about ransomware since I first started detecting it in 1989. I've been doing computer security for 34 years. I've written 12 books and over 1,100 magazine articles on it. You can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter if you like. There's some of my books. My latest one is Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication, where I talk about how you can hack any multi-factor authentication solution you come across. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor. Basically, we try to help people to keep their coworkers from being phished. Right? It's a really, I love working for KnowBe4 and what we're trying to do. But today we're talking about ransomware and talking about ransomware in kind of an advanced way. We're going to talk about why a backup no longer saves you, what the CISA, the U.S. government's official organization, recommends that you should do about ransomware, what we think you should do about ransomware, all the different policies and technical controls and education you can do to stop ransomware in its tracks. We're not going to cover everything, but I'm certainly going to give you resources you can download that will cover everything. We'll talk about incident response, and more importantly, we're going to end it with how to detect any ransomware program, no matter how secretive it is, because the average ransomware program is in a organization from 8 months to a year, sometimes longer than a year, without being detected, even though the people are running active, up-to-date antivirus. So we're going to talk about that, how I can give you a way that you can always detect ransomware, even if it's not detected by your antivirus. So we're going to start off with how ransomware has changed over the last year or so. Traditional ransomware, and again, the first ransomware program I ever came across was the 1989 AIDS cop Trojan. You can look that up on Wikipedia if you like, but ransomware has been around for a long, long time. It really got a lot more sophisticated in about 2005, and it really took off when Bitcoin came out because the ransomware gangs could get paid without getting caught so easily. But what traditional ransomware does is you get tricked into downloading it, through social engineering, or you have unpatched software. But typically you get tricked into installing this Trojan horse program. You execute it, and traditional ransomware, certainly for a lot of years, as soon as you executed it, it would go around and start encrypting files and folders and then ask you for a ransom to give you the decryption keys. That was really when it was kind of targeting home users, and it would ask for like $200 or something like that. Then it started to realize that it could get more money by attacking businesses, so it would start to try to spread as much as possible first. So it would try to scrape passwords out of memory Windows passwords, Windows network logon passwords, try to scrape them out of memory and use that to spread the malware program, the ransomware, to as many servers and computers as possible, and then go off all at once. And telling people, hey, you have to pay us the ransom if you want to, if you want to get the decryption key or keys. A lot of times there's multiple keys involved. But then ransomware at the end of 2019 and certainly in 2020, ransomware got a lot more malicious. Essentially, the ransomware crooks got tired of victims who had really good backups saying, no, we're not going to pay you. And they realized, hey, that when we're in these environments, we're in there on an average of 8 months to a year. We're undetected. We've got everybody's passwords. We have the admin passwords. We have the root passwords. We have the domain administrator passwords. We have, the hacker gold. We can do anything. And encrypting data and holding it for hostage, that's like the least of what the victim has to worry about, because we have God control of that environment. So that's what it changed. So what ransomware does today, and again, it still gets, it typically tricks an end user. An end user connects to the internet or gets an email or connects to a website that's been compromised to get tricked into installing some type of malicious Trojan horse program. It installs what's called a Trojan dropper file. So typically the first file can be ransomware, but many times all it is this smaller dropper stub file that its only job is to get, to be part of an end user tricking it. It needs to be unscannable, undetectable by any of the antiviruses. The end user executes it. It immediately hides, immediately goes in on a machine and tries to make sure it can live through a reboot by, modifying a registry key or something like that, so that when the person reboots it, it automatically gets executed. When it gets executed for the first time, again, it will go install itself on the computer so it can live through a reboot, and then it dials home, usually within 15 seconds of being executed, and what's to it's controlling command and control servers. They're called CNC servers or C2 servers. But it will actually go to the connect to the CNC servers and then start to download updated copies of itself or additional malware, things like TrickBot that will go around and try to find a bunch of passwords that are in memory. The big thing is that it updates itself a lot. Like every 30 minutes, it checks to see, do I need to update it? Those command and control servers know whether or not the dropper or the ransomware program that's involved is being detected by the antivirus or endpoint detection response EDR software. A lot of times what they'll check is virus total, and see virus total is a Google service. You can go to virustotal.com, and it has like 70 plus antivirus engines there, and the attackers, the ransomware gang, will keep track of when their program starts to show up on the radar on one or more antiviruses, and they'll constantly update and re-encrypt and re-encode the ransomware program so that it never gets detected. The vast majority of ransomware that I download or I see in emails that I run on my isolated virtual machines are not detectable by any antivirus. But every once in a while, I'll download one that will be detected by something. As soon as I execute it, though, it connects to the command control servers, downloads a new copy of itself, and immediately is undetectable. It's amazing to see. Happens in a couple of seconds. And a lot of times they'll download a couple of other programs, all of which were undetectable, and that's how it evades getting removed by an antivirus program. Most of the time they'll collect as many passwords as they can from the machines they're on, the passwords that are in memory, the passwords that are in disk, the passwords that are in, password managers and internet browsers and things like that. And then they'll upload them to the command and control servers and give them to the hackers. Then it will usually notify the ransomware gang that they've broken into a new IP address. Typically, the ransomware gang is connecting to the command and control servers using an admin console. And it's showing them, here's the 10 IP addresses we broke in today, or domain names, or here's the 100 we broke into today. And the ransomware gang can actually take its time and sift through the IP addresses and try to determine where they've broken into. Was it a small place? Was it a big place? Was it a juicy place where they can ask for lots of money? Again, the average, what's called dwell time, the average time that ransomware is in an environment before it executes and goes off, is somewhere around 8 to 12 months. And I've frequently read stories where ransomware was in over a year. And again, a lot of that is because the ransomware gang got notified that this IP address got compromised, but they didn't check it and find out, oh, this is a big deal. This is some big Fortune 500 company or something like that. Or they'll just spend weeks or months researching the target to figure out what's the best way to get the most money out of that particular target. And then the hackers will come in, assess and analyze the target, and do lots of things, still whatever they want. This is the typical ransomware program today, a whole lot more sophisticated than the, hey, I execute, run, and encrypt stuff of yesterday. And these days, they still will launch encryption and ask for a ransom, but they usually have a lot of other stuff. Usually, they've gone into the compromised network, they've researched it, they've listened in on emails, they've tried to figure out what the crown jewels are of the organization. They'll exfiltrate data, they'll exfiltrate emails, they'll exfiltrate passwords, customer passwords, employee passwords, company passwords, as many passwords as they can get. Then they'll encrypt all of those servers and the crown jewel data, and they'll ask for a ransom. And they say, listen, if you don't pay us, usually they say, hey, you need to pay us to get your servers unlocked. But a lot of people, well, I've got a good backup. And they'll go, hey, but we've got your data. We've exfiltrated your data. So this is how ransomware has changed. And today, this is 70% of ransomware, and it's probably going to be 90% of ransomware by the end of the year. This is what started, I call it kind of ransomware 2.0 or nuclear ransomware. It started in November, December of 2019. Some ransomware programs tried this approach, the things that they do here. Today, it's most ransomware. If you get a ransomware program that only encrypts your data, count yourself lucky. Today, what they usually do is steal intellectual property and data. So they say, hey, here, we've stolen your crown jewels, we've stolen your emails, we've stolen your customer list and databases and passwords. And if you don't pay us, we're going to release them on the internet or release them to hackers or release them to competitors. And I don't know about you. You can be the best company in the world, but if they're threatening to release your personal emails and your private data, that's a big deal. And that alone has made more and more companies pay more and more ransom. It significantly increased the percentage of victims that pay the ransom because they don't want their private information getting out there. They steal every password, log-on credential they can, not only business login names and passwords, but employee login names and passwords. Remember, those programs are on those networks and those devices for up to a year. And think about, you're an employee, you're picking up, you go to your bank account, you go to your stock account, you go to Instagram and Amazon, and oh, that's right, I need to buy this thing on Amazon. Well, now they got your Amazon password. And if you have a customer portal, they've got the customer's passwords, and they tell the customer, they will threaten the victims, employees, and customers and say, listen, we've got all your information. We've got your social security numbers. We've got your credit card numbers. We've got your login names, and we're going to make your lives a living hell because Roger, the guy you work for, the guy that you buy stuff from, he doesn't want to pay our ransom. So they actually frequently nowadays threaten the employees and customers of the original victim. If they can, a lot of times they'll use information that they've learned at one company to attack another company. A lot of times they'll do spear phishing from one email address to another email address. So, a lot of times when you're trying to teach people don't get phished, you're telling people, well, if you get an email from somebody you've never seen before or a strange email address, well, it doesn't work because these people are working from within the email clients of people that you trust. And they'll go through the person's inbox and sent items and figure out, hey, this is a good email that I can use to phish that other person that trusts this person. They also do public shaming. They have websites and their own PR teams that will let the world know that they've compromised this company, and they usually will tell the world whether or not the person paid the ransom or not, or publicly shame them if they didn't. All of these things, again, is what ransomware now does. Over 70% of ransomware does what I just said here. If you're interested in the subject on that, I teach a 1-hour webinar on nuclear ransomware that you can go to there. But again, when I started teaching that last year, it was maybe 20-30% of all ransomware. Now it's over 70% of all ransomware. Here's a little screenshot from Cubware from a recent report where they said that now 70% of all ransomware attacks now exfiltrate data. So does your senior management, when senior management says, well, we're never paying the ransom, that's probably because they think you have a good backup. Do they know that ransomware now steals your data and says if you don't pay, that they're going to release it to the world? If your senior management doesn't know that, they need to know that. So we're going to talk now what the official U.S. government recommends for mitigating ransomware. We're going to talk about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I almost always want to say Internet Security Agency, but it's not. It's Infrastructure Security Agency, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That's the United States' new primary cybersecurity defender. They took a lot of previous organizations like US CERT and melded them all together. And let me say that I'm not a big fan of government organizations. I tend to think that they are run somewhat inefficiently and they're slow to move and they don't give good advice. I don't like any government agency, but I like CISA. I think that CISA, or whatever you're going to say it, I think that they do the best job of any government agency I've ever seen. I'm a big fan of them. They're a really good organization. Anything they say, you can take to the bank for the most part. They're very on top of it. They're very responsive. They're very aggressive for a government agency. They like to announce, they'll let you know about new vulnerabilities and threats. I get emails from them all the time. They share information with people that give you indicators of compromise. So if you've been compromised by SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange saying, they will give you lots of emails telling you what to look for and links to tools and links to advice, and they give you mitigations. And they do more than just the internet and cybersecurity, but that is a big part of what they do. And again, I'm a big fan of them. I think you should be a big fan of them. Here's some of their example warnings that they send out when something big happens, like this is supernova, which hit a while ago. That's it said malware affecting unpatched SolarWinds Orion software, and here's indicators of compromised things you can look for to see if you've been hit. And they have lots of links and to help you take a look and figure out if you've been attacked by them or by this particular malware and what you can do. It really is solid stuff. Though every week I'll get a list of every single vulnerability they know about that's being patched, and usually it's 100 to 150, 200 vulnerabilities long. It usually takes me a couple of minutes to go through the list, but I got to tell you, I love looking at the list because really, in a minute or two, I can kind of figure out, do I have software? Does my organization have software that I need to be worried about, that I need to make sure is getting patched? And they even put out stuff like, be careful about scammers impersonating the FTC, and, point you to blog posts. If you haven't done this, I recommend that you subscribe to the CISA alerts. There's the URL for that. I think they're awesome. I probably get somewhere between 2, 3, 5 emails a week from them. I find them to be highly useful, so I think you should subscribe to get those emails too. They got lots of quick links that you can click on to go to for different cybersecurity things, including, get this, ransomware. They have a whole portal at CISAGov/ransomware that you can go to, and they recommend mitigations against ransomware. And I love what they say: update your software and operating systems with the latest patches. That makes sense. Never click on links or open file attachments, unsolicited emails. That is good advice. Back up your data on a regular basis, keep it on a separate device and store it offline. That's all good, and so on and so on. I think they give really good advice, and they let you know when major ransomware attacks are happening, when there's been changes in a particular ransomware family or group. They even have, especially if you're in K-12 education, they have a lot of stuff that you can download. I just really think it's kind of cool. They have fact sheets and infographics and alerts and reference material and ransomware training and webinars. Not as good as mine, but really good for a government agency. So again, I'm a big, big fan of them. And initially I was kind of skeptical, but whoever is in charge, the people in charge are running that place and how they're doing it, my hats are off. They're a fantastic organization, and you should rely on them and communicate with them if you need to. And here's some other examples where they're saying this is how you should prevent ransomware from happening. To make sure you're not tomorrow's headline, back up your data. Back up your data. Keep the backups offline. I wish they underlined that, the keep the backups offline part. Update and patch your systems. Make sure your security solutions are up to date. Review and exercise your incident response plan. You have one of those, right? And pay attention to ransomware events and apply the lessons learned, because ransomware does change as it has changed over the last year, and a backup alone no longer completely saves you. But I think I have some specific recommendations on top of what they recommend, although again, I love what they tell you to do. But the biggest thing is that I think you need to risk rank the ways that you're most likely to get ransomware. The majority of all malicious digital breaches are due to social engineering and phishing, followed by unpatched software, and have been for over 3 decades. Sometimes different little things like USB keys or password guessing or something like that will move something out of the way. But overall, over the 34 years that I've been in computer security, unpatched software and social engineering have been the number 1, number 2 ways that people get compromised, that malicious data breaches happen, and that applies to ransomware as well. So the thing to keep in mind here is if you want to stop cybersecurity breaches, you have to fight social engineering, and unpatched software is the number one, number two things you do the most, first and best, because everything else added up all together after those two things only applies to about 1 to 10% of your risk in most years. And if you don't take care of the number one and number two most likely ways to get compromised, well, nothing else really matters, right? If you don't solve what's probably somewhere around 90% of attacks, those two things, social engineering and unpatched software, then concentrating on some part of the other 10% is probably not going to save you. So concentrate your efforts where your prevention efforts will mean the best bang for the buck. Here's a screenshot that came from KnowBe4, again, which is an interesting, ransomware fighting vendor. The stats are a little bit different than what I just gave you, and I put them here just to show you they do differ. Unpatched software and social engineering account for 90 to 99% of all malicious data breaches on average. But there are ransomware. There are times when different things in ransomware or certain attacks kick in and certainly become a big deal. Like for a couple of years, password guessing against RDP with people having weak passwords and not having account lockout enabled allowed a particular ransomware family to get in a whole lot, and people weren't patching it. But if you take a look here, even today with the KnowBe4 thing, so it used to be that RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, Microsoft's remote administration technique tool, was being compromised, usually again because people had weak passwords or hadn't patched RDP. RDPs needed to be patched a couple times over the last couple of years. It has now fallen, and you can see what's number one: email phishing. Software vulnerability there, it looks like they had that around 10%, maybe a little bit under 10%. I see that higher, so I disagree with what KnowBe4's got here, but I mean, that's their stat and that's their data stat, and I think it's great that they have it. But just keep in mind there that even in their stuff, email phishing, social engineering is number one, and it looks like RDP is coming down, plummeting, you can see, because people are either finally using better passwords more often, or they're patching it or something like that. But for my money, it's concentrate on fighting social engineering and unpatched software. And yeah, there we go. Let me keep going. And sometimes they have USB keys. I'll see that in some surveys. Like one time I saw that USB keys were responsible for 7% of all ransomware attacks. I've never personally come across where that was the case, but certainly there are people that report that. So you got to make sure you still scan your USB keys. So this is what I think everybody should do to defend themselves against ransomware. First of all, you do still need to have a good backup. It needs to be a thorough, complete system tested offline, up-to-date backup. And you need to test restores. A lot of people that say that they have a good backup they back up a system and then they test like restoring one server or one folder or a few files in one folder. Like, yeah, we got a good backup. No. If ransomware goes off in your company, it's taken down 100 of your servers. It's going to take down the main servers, the database servers, the middleware servers, the front-end web servers, the patching servers, your Active Directory servers, your DNS servers. Can you handle an attack of that size? And have you done a tested restore? I know many people that think they have a good backup, but they do for one file, one folder, one server. It doesn't work so great when they have to do a complete massive restore from a previous date and time of these multi-integrated systems. And many times that doesn't work when they go to try. It turns out it doesn't work there. So you must make sure that you have a good, thorough backup, offline backup that's been tested with a complete whole system restore. And most people don't do that. And then they get caught, when they go to do it and they think they have. I know some people that have a good restore, have good backups and good restores, but then they find out it's going to take them, 5 weeks to do the tape restoration they want to do, and they end up paying the ransom anyway. So test and know ahead of time. Most organizations do not have a good, thorough, complete system tested offline backup and restore. But these days, remember, 70% of malware, a backup alone is not going to save you. So we must stop ransomware from accessing your environment in the first place. That is step number one. And I hear people go, well, we'll never be able to stop it. Well, you're certainly not going to be able to stop it with that attitude. You must try your best to stop ransomware from accessing your environment. How do you do it? Stop social engineering, patch your software. Those two things are pretty significant, will reduce most of the risk. And really, you need to do your best defense in-depth defense, right? You need to have the best policies, technical controls, and training to prevent things from happening in the first place. Policies are things like, you have a policy that tries to reduce risk by telling people, oh, don't open unexpected file attachments, or we will never ask you for your password in an email or something like that. Technical controls, that's all the technical things you do, like secure configurations, up-to-date software, patching your software, antivirus software, anti-spam, anti-phishing, content filtering, all the things that you do to stop badness from getting to your end users. But no matter how great your policy and technical controls are, it's going to get passed some of the time to the end users. The average end user has to deal with like a phishing attack at least once every week to twice a month in the best cases. And so you want to do training where you teach people how to spot the badness and what to do, which is hopefully to delete it and report it. But again, you want to try to get your best policies, technical controls, and training to create preventative controls that prevent malware and ransomware from attacking you in the first place. Failing that, if something gets past your preventative controls, you want to have early detection and response and recovery to minimize damage, and then hopefully see, do I need to update my preventative controls? How did something get past my preventative controls? If you're interested in that, I call this the 3x3 pillars of computer security defense. There's a link. You can go download and read that article. I've written a lot on this topic over the years. But if you're going to ask me, what's the top 5 things I should do to stop ransomware or really any hacking or malware? Focus on mitigating social engineering. Social engineering is the #1 cause and has been for over 3 decades for most malicious data breaches, followed by people abusing internet accessible software. So patch your operating system, patch your browsers, patch your add-ins. If that software can get to the internet or listen from the internet, or people can get to it from the internet from the outside, you need to patch it. They're not attacking your cafeteria program or your pager program or something. They're attacking the software that can access the internet or be accessed from the internet. Also, you want to use non-guessable passwords. I don't think they have to be super long and complex. They just need to be something better than password or QWERTY or 12345. And if you can use multi-factor authentication, even though I can hack multi-factor authentication, even though thousands of people can hack multi-factor authentication is a good thing, and you should use it when and where you can. Unfortunately, you can't use it on most things, so you're going to have passwords too. And you need to make sure that you have unguessable passwords that an attacker can't easily guess against, even if they have like 3 million tries. But you want to make sure no matter what your password is, that it's different for every website and service, because hackers love to find your password that you share across multiple websites and servers and then use it against you. The average person has over 70 websites that is protected by a password, and they only have like 3 to 7 passwords that they spread across those 70 password sites. So or a website. So you want to make sure that you have different passwords for every website and service. It may mean that you need to run a password manager. I'm a big fan of password managers, any of them really. I also think it's a big deal and a good thing to teach everybody, yourself and your friends and your end users and your family, how to spot rogue URLs. That is one of the best skills you can do. Most of the social engineering phishing attacks, especially in emails on the web and sent through SMS text messaging, they will have a rogue URL that's trying to trick somebody into going somewhere. They're going to claim they're from Microsoft or Facebook or Twitter, but they're not really from that person. But if you teach people how to read URLs and how to spot rogue URLs, they're less likely to be tricked. You can go to my blog article on the 12 most common rogue URL tricks. You can go to my webinar on it, and I'll show you a PDF in a minute that you can download and read and use and send to anyone. And also use least permissive permissions. So don't be logged into your laptop as administrator or root. Don't be logged in as the main admin on your network all the time. Don't, if you put files up on a website, make sure they're not everyone read or everyone full control. So this is it. There's a million things you can do to protect yourself against hackers and malware. There is no doubt in my 34 years of experience that these are the best 5 things you can do to stop all malware and hackers, including ransomware. So focus first and best on mitigating social engineering using policies, technical controls, and education. Patch your internet accessible software and do it religiously and consistently. Hackers love inconsistency. Use non-guessable passwords or multi-factor authentication. Use different passwords for every website and service. Teach yourself and your end users how to spot rogue URLs and use least permissive permissions at all times. You can also go to this link here and download our red flags of social engineering. This is a really cool PDF that you can download and share with anyone, but it talks about, I think it's like 22 different signs to look for. Like if you get an email, how can you tell the difference between it being legitimate and possibly a social engineering malicious attack? Things like, does it have is the from name different than the name that's in the email? If you hit reply, is the from and the reply address differently? Does it come in at 3 a.m.? A lot of these social engineering attacks are coming from foreign countries on the other side of the globe. So when they send you an email, it arrives at 3 a.m. Well, 3 a.m. is not a normal time for someone to get an email. Does it contain dangerous file attachments? Are they trying to trick you into opening the file attachment? Does it contain a rogue URL? So you can download this PDF, or you can email me at rogerg@knowbe4.com and I'll send you the PDF, but you can send this PDF to anyone. It really is a good educational piece of PDF. And we also have another one that I helped create called the Red Flags of Rogue URL. So it's the 12 most common rogue URL tips. Again, you can go to that blog link or you can email me at rogerg@knowbe4.com and I'll send you this PDF that you can share and send to anyone that just talks about here's the most common types of tricks that hackers will use in email. Like, hey, they're saying they're from Microsoft, but they're misspelling online, or they're really from, or it says LinkedIn, but really it's LL LinkedIn, or it says it's Microsoft, but really it's Deck 20 Info or something like that. Or they say they're PayPal, but it really is, bank or something like that, or Google Chrome updates, right? Google Chrome updates is not a website that's related to Google. It's just some harassing domain that some spammer made up. And so if you want to teach people how to spot rogue URLs, here's a good PDF that you can download and use and send to anybody that you like. And we have lots of good information on how to protect yourself against ransomware. We have a ransomware portal. Just like CISA, we have a ransomware portal at knowbe4.com/ransomware. We have the Ransomware Hostage Rescue Manual Guide. If you're interested in trying to defend yourself against ransomware, download that guide. I help write and update the 2020 edition there, and it has all the information and advice that I'm giving you in this talk, all in one ebook. We also have something called the Ransomware Simulator, which is a really cool tool. It's a free tool that you can download. It's also, the URL is in the resources attached to this talk here. But it's kind of cool in that it simulates over a dozen common ransomware programs. And essentially you download and run this thing. And as it simulates these over a dozen common ransomware programs, and we update it all the time for the latest ransomware, you can find out, will your endpoint detection and response or antivirus software detect these ransomware programs? I have people email me all the time. I ran your ransomware simulator and it wouldn't allow me to install it. Our antivirus is detecting stuff and killing it. Well, that's good. And I have other people telling me your tool didn't work because I ran it and nothing caught it. And our security guy says that it must be that your tool's not working or it's not being recognized by the antivirus. Okay, sure, you can believe that. But the ransomware simulator, what we call Ransom, you can download and use and just see how it does in your environment using your defensive protective tools and mitigations. And then again, you want to try everything you can to prevent phishing. Phishing is the #1 way that people get compromised. You want to try to stop it using the best combination of all these things. And I talk about, and there's an ebook I'll show you in a minute where I cover all of these things, but certainly you want good policies, good education, you want secure desktop, secure configuration, make sure that least privilege, that you're not logged in as administrator all the time, make sure there's anti-phishing filters on your emails and content filtering on your browsing stuff, make sure you're running up-to-date antivirus or EDR software. It's always really cool if you have what's called detonation sandboxes for any rogue-looking URLs or file attachments. A lot of systems like even Microsoft's O365, they will allow you to, when you've got this URL or this file attachment, you can actually internal functionality that will execute them in a sandbox and see if they try to do something malicious to you. You also want to make sure you enable SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. SPF is Sender Policy Framework. DKIM's domain key is identified mail, and DMARC is related to those two things. But essentially, those are three global anti-phishing standards. Your domain should have that enabled on your email servers so that people that get emails that claim to be from you, they can check to see if they really are from you. And your email clients and servers should check for SPF, DKIM, and DMARC to see if emails claiming to be from someone else really is from someone else. So if you don't know what SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are, there is a link to my 1-hour webinar on it. And of course, I've written lots of free articles you can download. Let me say this again, you need to have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC enabled on your email servers and on your email clients and servers so that you can use it to your best extent. If you don't know what those are, you want to check and see if they're enabled. If they're not enabled, you want to make sure you enable all three, and all kinds of other programs and stuff. We'll talk about application control programs in just a minute in a lot more detail. But I did make a book called The Ultimate, here's a webinar that's called it's a 1-hour webinar that I think it's 100 slides long on everything you can do to stop phishing. Or if you want to, there's my ebook. The ebook, I think it's like 49 pages long. If you don't want to watch a 1-hour webinar, you'd rather read it and look through the ebook, you can do that. I help write and do both of those. So if you want to try everything you can do to prevent phishing or see if there's something that you've missed, try those guides right there. And incident response, if you've been hit by ransomware, you got three main priorities here. You want to stop the spread of the ransomware. That typically means cutting off the internet and cutting off your network so that it can't spread to more machines if it hasn't spread already. Trying to minimize or stop the damage, which usually means stopping, cutting off the internet and sometimes shutting down machines and that sort of stuff too. You can clean them and closing holes. This is a really big one. Is that somehow the ransomware got in, either social engineering, unpatched software, or maybe password guessing or something like that. A lot of companies will get rid of the ransomware, but they don't close the vulnerabilities and exploit areas that allow the ransomware to get into in the first place, and they just get hit again a second time or a third time, and each time it tends to get much worse. So you want to make sure that you not only stop the spread and the damage from the current ransomware program, but you close the initial root exploit holes that allowed them to get a foothold in the first place, because if not, if you get rid of ransomware, it will just come back in. This is what CISA says you should do, that you should ask for help. Contact CISA themselves, the FBI, or the Secret Service. You should work with an experienced advisor to help you recover from a cyber attack. That is for sure. You do not want to be going through a ransomware attack with someone that has not handled a lot of ransomware attacks. I talked to ransomware incident response. They're called ransomware response brokers is the name I'll hear used. And those guys have done thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of ransomware responses. You do not want to be with somebody new for the first time. It's kind of like if your kid's hurt and going to the doctor to get surgery, you don't want to use a doctor that's probably fresh out of medical school. I mean, you can if he's a really good doctor, but you don't know. What the doctor you want to use is the doctor that all of his nurses would put their kids with, right? And a lot of times it ain't the brand new doctor, but the doctor that's done 1,000 surgeries, been there and done that. You want to isolate your infected systems, which again can many times be dozens to hundreds of systems, and phase the return to operations as you get clean systems and know that they don't have any remote backdoors, and you close all the holes. You do need to review any connections of business relationships with your customers, partners, vendors, and I would add in there, and CISA misses this, employees, because a lot of times their information has been stolen too, their passwords, their confidential information, and you need to have a way to reaching out to them and assuring them that you're going to make things good. You need to have a PR marketing strategy for all of those people, for customers, partners, vendors, and employees. Of course, you want to apply business impact assessment findings to prioritize what you need to recover. And I tell people, remember, ransomware a lot of times puts you down completely, like takes down 100 machines. Can you keep doing the average ransomware recovery time is going to be usually a couple of weeks, really, to a couple of months. But I mean, you're going to be down usually at least a couple of days, if not longer. How can your business function without computer systems for days to weeks? Can you? I know companies that have gone back to paper things and credit card slips with the embossing machines. So figure out your business continuity plans, your disaster recovery plans need to include how will we do business if our computer systems are down for days or 2 weeks. And sometimes that can occur even if you pay the ransom. You're going to be down days to at least 2 weeks, even if you pay the ransom. So keep that in mind in your recovery efforts. You should have a ransomware response plan. Our ransomware hostage rescue manual guide talks about this. That you want to have. Not only do you want to have a ransomware response plan that includes all the things you're going to do to stop the spread of the ransomware and recover from the ransomware and communications plan and all that stuff. Not only do you want to have a ransomware response plan, you want it to be documented, you want it to be practiced. The people on the teams that are going to be involved in it should do a run through or two, at least every 6 months or every year. And really important that you tell them don't deviate from the plan if we get hit. A lot of people will have a ransomware response plan or incident response plan, and then somebody in IT is going rogue because their friend Pete has responded to ransomware before and he knows what to do. And the next thing you know, there's some worse problem going on or some leak to the media that you didn't want. It can be a problem. So make sure everybody agrees to stay on plan and not to go rogue. But when you get hit by ransomware, you got to notify senior management for sure. You always want to get legal involved. Your legal team is going to be involved in making the decision whether or not you're going to pay the ransom. And also, they need to do all outside calls or email communications to anybody outside the firm. And that's because if legal makes that call, even if you're calling in technical people, even if you're talking about technical things, the legal people's communication is protected in America, at least in America and probably other places. So it becomes privileged communications and it can't be subpoenaed as easily in court. So make sure to get legal involved for a whole bunch of reasons and let them make all the outward calls and emails. You do want to cut off and freeze internet access. Call your insurance company if you have cybersecurity insurance that covers ransomware. Call on the ransomware experts. I cannot emphasize that enough. The worst recovery cases I see are from people that didn't call in the experts. Call your insurance company and the experts. Usually if you call your insurance company, they'll get you to the experts. A lot of times if you have an insurance company involved, they make you go to their ransomware expert. But let me say, they're typically, everyone I know that I've seen, I've read about, talked to, they're usually pretty good. And the reason why is the insurance companies are working with ransomware recovery experts that get people back up cheapest and quickest because they don't want to pay more money than they need to. They tend to be good experts that they trust. You do need to identify the ransomware strain. One of the most common things you'll need to do when you call on the experts, they'll go, hey, do you know what ransomware? There's a lot of different ransomware strains out there. Some are good, some are bad. Some of them are so bad that they'll tell you, even if you pay the ransom, the description key is not going to help you because it's really bad ransomware and doesn't recover real well. Sometimes they'll tell you that the person's unethical. Sometimes maybe you get lucky and you find out that there's a universal decryption key out there on the internet. So after you call on the experts, one of the biggest things they're going to want to know is, do you know the ransomware strain that hit you? Because they've got the experience of dealt with those ransomware gangs and kind of tell you how it's going to go. And then you need to decide ahead of time if your company is going to pay the ransom or not. Again, you as the IT or IT security person, you shouldn't be making that decision. That's a senior management decision. It's a legal decision, but you should have that made ahead of time and make sure senior management legal needs to know that ransomware many times is stealing that information and saying that they're going to publish it publicly if you don't pay the ransom. So they need to be aware of all the considerations. But you want to decide ahead of time if you're going to pay the ransom or not, because you don't want to be making that decision on the fly when you're hit by ransomware. It's not the best time to be making that decision. Plus, legal needs to do research and find out if it's legal for you to respond and pay the ransom. Sometimes it's not legal. Also remember this, that they are 70% of the time or more exfiltrating your data, but sometimes a ransomware gang will say, we have your data and you have to pay us so that we don't release your data to the public, but they really don't have your data, not a lot of data, so ask for verification. If you do that, all the ransomware gangs, most of them do have your data, and when they have your data, they're going to give you an example of your data, a spreadsheet, a couple spreadsheets, a database, records out of your database. Ask for verification. Also make sure that they promise that they'll delete it if you pay them. A lot of people will pay the money, pay the ransom, and the hacker said that they were going to delete the data, but really they just leave the data out there. They just don't release it, but they are usually putting it like on an AWS storage bucket or some other company's compromised server. And you want to say, listen, I'm paying you the ransom. I want to make sure that you delete my data as promised. That's why I'm paying here. So you want to get assurances. And people go, do they honor their word? Usually, especially if you're making an emphasis emphasis on it, they tend to do it. If they don't follow through with what they say they're going to do, people aren't ever going to pay the ransom. You definitely want to get somebody that understands how to negotiate with ransomware gangs. You don't want someone going there lowballing it so much that the guy just hurts you. I've heard of ransomware gangs where they just do something really bad because they didn't like the negotiator. So you want to talk to someone that understands the ransomware gang. Never pay all the money up front. You want to ask for proof that they have your data and the decryption key. The decryption key is going to work. Consider using a professional ransomware negotiator. They're all over the place. It's hard to believe, but there's people. They're not bad people. They're good people like me and you. They just for a living are professional ransomware negotiators. They're typically tied to a particular type of ransomware and ransomware gang, and that gang knows them, and they will work. They always get you more time to respond, and they help you get your data fixed and back and that sort of stuff. But remember, you could have legal consequences for paying the ransom, especially if the ransomware gang is on one of the terrorist watch list or one of the in America list. Last year, the U.S. Treasury put out a memo saying, be careful, you can be charged with a crime for paying the ransomware. I don't know anyone that was a victim that paid the ransom that actually has ever been charged with a crime, but you don't want to be the first. So let your legal team and senior management make that decision. Make sure you have a good public relations response plan in place ahead of time, and you need to have PR for employees, PR relations plan for customers, investors, if you're a public company, and to public and to your employees. Remember that. Remember, that's a big one because they're many times attacking employees and customers today all at once. And then inviting other people to help you. Getting CISA involved is great. And if you invite CISA, what I hear is the odds that you might be charged with a crime for paying the ransom is significantly less. You can get other authorities involved like the FBI and the Secret Service. Just be aware that when you invite law enforcement into your issue, they can take over and do things like seize assets and stuff like that. I've heard of people, it doesn't happen a lot, but all of a sudden their servers got seized and they didn't get the servers back for years. And the FBI and the Secret Service, I've never heard of the FBI telling someone they couldn't pay a ransom or anything. But just be advised when you get law enforcement involved that they can do legal things and take over the investigation and take over the handling. Most of the time, they are all the CISA is great, FBI is great, Secret Service is great if you qualify for that sort of protection, but they're usually pretty good, and they've been there, done that. They're usually not going to hurt you. But remember, make sure let management and legal make the decisions to get any outside entity involved. Make legal make any outside calls or email connections. So again, it saves privileged communications. I'm a big fan of cybersecurity insurance. It's fairly low cost for the risk that it covers. Just make sure that the policy includes social engineering. I've heard of cybersecurity insurance that excluded or paid less if social engineering was involved. Well, since social engineering is involved in most attacks, it's almost like you don't really have coverage. So also you want to make sure ahead of time who has the ultimate can make the ultimate decision about whether you pay the ransom or not. Usually it's you, but it can be the insurance company. And of course, it's always good that if the insurance company has an incident response person, that you talk to that person ahead of time so that you can establish a relationship, say hello, get the right phone numbers, find out what the process is going to be like. Maybe only 1% to 2% of people that have cybersecurity insurance actually establish that relationship to the incident response broker ahead of time. But from everybody I've talked to that's ever done it, they said that when the proverbial crap hit the fan, they were really glad they had that pre-established relationship already and knew what they were going to need to do. Now, the last thing I want to finish with is that the biggest risk of any malware program, including ransomware, is when it's undetected, called dwell time. And again, ransomware is typically in environments from 8 to 12 months. And during that time, the hackers and malware can be doing anything. And the longer they're in, the more your risk increases over time. And so I'm going to tell you how you can detect any malware program. Here it is to use an application control program and monitor or audit only mode. So you can have an application control program where you snapshot a new clean machine. So you snapshot a baseline clean image. You install all the software that you want on your images, and then you baseline snapshot it. And the application control program will take and make rules based upon what should be running. And then anytime there's any new execution, i.e. malware, it could be not malware, but if it's malware, it's going to detect it. It will create a log event. You copy that to the centralized database and then research any and all new executions immediately. And you can create reports and security workflows from this information. So again, application control programs, if you're not familiar with them, they're called whitelisting programs, blacklisting programs, but essentially they allow you to whitelist programs. Which says whitelisting is only these programs can run. Blacklisting is all programs can run, but these executables, typically when people use application control programs, they're using whitelisting. But we want to use what's called monitor and audit only mode versus blocking or enforcement mode. Blocking or enforcement mode means that you're actually going to stop things that aren't on the rules from running. We don't want that. We just want to create events. We want to monitor and audit only to create events that we can then research. Again, you can build most of the rules by snapshotting baseline a system. Then when you get an exception, it writes it to the security log, and then you can research the new executions. Windows, enterprise versions of Windows comes with AppLocker and Windows Defender Application Control. AppLocker is the one we're going to talk about today. It's easy to use, easy to configure, easy to turn on, easy to turn off. Windows Defender Application Control, a lot harder. Most major antivirus vendors have their own application control programs. There's a lot of commercial versions out there as well. Beyond Trust, Carbon Black, Tripwire, Cisco Avanti, just to name a few. I like all of those. Open source versions for Linux and BSD, they really don't have any good ones. SC Security Enhanced Linux, AppArmor, or FAP Policy AD, which is a funny name, Damon. Those can be used to do application control. To be honest with you, they're all terrible. And I would tell you, go get a commercial version like Tripwire or something like that that works with Linux or BSD or Apple. Although I do like application or AppLocker on Windows by itself. If you're interested, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies has a special publication guide, 800-167, on your guide to application and whitelisting. I think it's only 8 pages long, so it's a really good one to do. But looking at AppLocker, if we're going to use this, it's been in Windows, again, since Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008. Before that, in Windows XP, they had something called software restriction policies. But you can configure AppLocker using standalone gpedit.msc or Active Directory group policy if you want to do it across a bunch of machines, or use mobile device management software like Microsoft Intune. Do an example here of just running AppLocker. You can do it on a Windows machine with gpedit. If you do gpedit.msc, hit enter. You can then choose computer configuration, security settings, application control policies, and then AppLocker. And then there's 4 types of rules you can create: executable rules, Windows installer rules, script rules, and package app rules. Package apps rules are the new what's called modern apps that run in a browser. They can each be enabled separately. You should enable all 4 of them. And to do that, just as an example, I would right-click the property. I do AppLocker, right-click properties when I'm in gpedit.msc. Then it will give you the 4 rules. You can say configure the 4 rules, and you can choose enforcement mode or audit only mode. We're going to choose audit only mode, and then we say automatically generate the rules. And then you tell it to start at the // It will tell you // program files. You want to change that to say // which is the root directory. Then tell it to create rules. It then will take a minute or 2 to create all the rules, and it will tell you it's generating rules, and will create somewhere around 1,200 to maybe 5,000 rules, depending on how much software you have on your computer. In this example, it created almost 26,000 rules, and you go create. So it snapshots the machine. Here it's saying, do you want to create default rules? We're going to say no today. But anyways, there's all the rules, all the executable rules. Again, it's like 2,598 rules, but that's all the software that you want to allow to run, and will create an 8003 security event if something that's not in that list tries to run. If you're on Windows for the first time, you're going to need to turn on the application identity service, and once you turn it on once, you don't have to turn it on anymore. And when you turn it on for the first time, you'll see that you have 0 events in your Windows event log, AppLocker log. There's nothing there. But eventually, like in this example, I downloaded some ransomware from mouseshare.com. Be careful you go to mouseshare.com. They've got tens of thousands of examples of real malware. Don't go there unless you're allowed to be there and you know what you're doing. But for this test today, I downloaded some malware and executed it, and it locked up my machine and asked for a ransom. I even ran Microsoft Windows sysinternals tool, and it showed me that it said the ransomware program named itself Client Server Runtime. The beta results mega pump rhetoric from Facebook. It really wasn't from Facebook. It really was ransomware. When I uploaded to VirusTotal sysinternals, 58 of the 72 antivirus engines that already recognize this one as cryptic ransomware. But let's assume that it didn't know. Most of the time, ransomware is not detected right away. You can see it creates this 8003 event that says, hey, this this program was allowed to run, but it would not been allowed to run if AppLocker policy was in enforcement mode. It creates this 8003 event. I would say copy that to a database, have a person or a team research each and every new executable to see if that new executable was something, that was silly, like Spotify or some new program they meant to download, or was it something malicious? And then every time a new executable is detected by the application control program, research it. Find out whether it was malicious or not. You can submit it to VirusTotal or your antivirus vendor to see if it was malicious or not. You can run it in a detonation sandbox to see the effects of the execution, or you can send in an email to the end user and ask them, hey, did you mean to install this thing? And then resolve it as being benign or malicious. In the deck here, I have this email where we're just asking the end user, hey, we detected this executable on your machine while you're logged on in. Did you mean to run it? Did you know about it? Yes or no? And again, I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to get to the end so we can take some questions. But if you have any questions that we don't get to today, feel free to email me at rogerg@knowbe4.com, and you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. But again, if we don't get to your questions today, go to rogerg@knowbe4.com. Thanks for putting up with me with how fast I talk, but apparently I didn't talk fast enough. But David, can we take a question or two before it ends?
Absolutely. Take a breath there, Roger. Have a drink. We do have a lot of questions for you. We won't have time to get to all of them, but we'll see if we can just take a few here before we wrap up. First question I wanted to ask you, Roger, is they're asking, does KnowBe4 protect you against ransomware?
Only in trying to educate people not to be socially engineered, which is, remember, the number one way people get ransomware is through social engineering. So we try to educate people so they don't get socially engineered. So that's how we help.
Okay. George is asking, would ransomware decrease if the government outlawed Bitcoin?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they'd have to outlaw all cryptocurrency. Yeah. There's certainly a big kick up when cryptocurrencies came into existence, but genie's out of the bottle. If they're even to outlaw Bitcoin, something else would just come in its place where, it's just an outcome that we're living with right now.
Okay. Another question here, how do we detect if email is suspicious? Is it just they need more training, would you say, from KnowBe4, or?
Yeah, I mean, training from anyone, but certainly we have that sort of software. What we try to do is mimic the type of social engineering emails or SMS phishing or website phishing that you might get. And you don't want to be the only times when your users are tested about whether they'll click on a fish, be when a real fish hits you. So what we do is allow you to provide training to your end user about the different common ways that they can be socially engineered and attacked, help them recognize that they're being socially engineered, what to do, which is hopefully to respond and delete the phishing attack. That's what we do. We help automate providing education and simulated phishing tests as part of that education, so that if somebody is more susceptible to a phishing attack, they click on too many phishing attacks, they'll get more training. We help automate that.
Got it. Okay. And what are your thoughts on paying the ransom when they threaten to expose internal files and personal data to the public?
Yeah, let me say that most people these days, more than ever, are paying the ransom. It really doesn't matter what I think about it. I'll tell you this: I don't have a social stigma with paying it. The idea is no one should pay. If no one paid, there'd be no ransomware, and that's true. But it's tough to say that then when your data is about to be leaked out there and your private emails are about to be public. And if everybody else is paying, you not paying is not going to change the fact. Somewhere between, well over half the people are paying the ransom today. What I would say is make sure you let senior management and legal make that decision, because there are some legal implications of paying the ransom. But certainly, I don't think there should be a stigma. And and I will also say people that typically don't pay the ransom take longer to get back up. But if you don't need to pay the ransom, that's great. It's fantastic, but I don't feel bad about people that also pay the ransom, because it's a pretty common thing. More often than not, people are paying the ransom these days. It's just a hideous state of situation right now.
And what's your stance on keeping software up to date, even if there's no vulnerability? Should you continue to update your software all the time, or is it like, if it's not broken, don't fix it?
I always think that it's, keep it up to date. A lot of recommendations say we'll only do critical security updates, but a lot of times there's feature sets that are just better. Like browsers get updated all the time. The Google Chrome browser, for example, every update, it's better at fighting what's called notification phishing, which is another webinar I teach, this notification phishing stuff. Every update fights that better, and they're not fixing a security hole. They're just handling and tackling something. So if you were to update the Google Chrome update that has a better feature of handling that, they're not going to say it's a security update. It's just really a feature set they're adding, but it's doing a better job. Yes, keep all your software up to date.
Okay. Excellent advice all around. Always an amazing presentation, Roger. I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you so much for being on the event today. All right. And with that, it's now time for our final gift card announcement. We have an Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to William St. Croix from Kentucky. Congratulations, William St. Croix from Kentucky. We'll reach out to you to deliver that gift card. We'll also be reaching out to our best question prize winner today after the event via email. There's a lot of questions we didn't have time to get to. I apologize for that, but Roger has generously put up his email address there on the screen, rogerg@knowbe4.com. And of course, don't forget about the handouts tab there. Roger has also provided his slide deck as well as a resource on how to prevent and mitigate ransomware like the pros. Also, check out the ransomware simulator there in the handouts tab. And of course, always a ton of info over there at knowbe4.com. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope that you learned a lot and had a good time. I know I did. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.